This is the Free Traveler Monthly Confab. My name is Clint, and this is the Commoner Law Group's monthly confab, where we have discussions about everything related to free travel on the roadways. Somebody sent me an email today asking about international air travel. And yes, that is definitely a topic. We haven't covered that too much. We've been focusing mostly on the automobile and the traveling that you do in and around the roadways of our lands, the public roadways, which belong to all of us. So thanks for being here. We're going to be hanging out for about 2 hours. We have a special guest, and he's going to teach us some things. We'll have always your voices, your questions, your comments, your takes on what's going on. We also want to hear your personal experience. If you're currently fighting or challenging a citation, or if you're actively taking steps to remove the necessity of a driver's license or registering your car, we want to hear about that and what you're learning as you go through it. Learning about the law, learning about the court system, learning about the enforcement mechanisms. So questions of authority and questions of power when it comes to our God-given right to move about the land when and where we please, without permission and without threat of penalties and punishments for not following rules, as if it's a privilege to drive on the road. Only a privilege. All right, so let's see. I'm looking for David Rodriguez to show up, and our special guest. And but we can go ahead and get started with a presentation I've got for you all. You know, we've been talking here at the Commoner Law Group, and in our discussions with the folks in the Don't Fear the DMV course, you know, top-down control, technocratic mechanisms require IDs. They need us to be stamped with a number, kind of like cattle are branded, and we need our IDs stamped on us. And so there's something we all may have heard of called the Real ID. It's a federal ID. In March of next year, there was a stated deadline. If you don't get your Real ID, you won't be able to fly between states within the United States. So that's the stick they're using. And I just want to show you all what I've researched, superficial, but it's a nice introduction into the Real ID, where it came from, what authority was granted to make it a thing, and we'll see some revealing things about the federal government and its overreach while we do that. And then hopefully out of that, you'll all take time to research it a little bit more and decide for yourself if you think this Real ID is real, is really what it's supposed to be. Something to protect us and keep us safe, you might guess. I'll tell you the details about that in a sec, but I want to welcome everybody again for coming. It's a pleasure and a joy to be in good company with people who are on the right side of life, people who don't question each other's sovereignty, people who don't use what I call slave talk. You know, there's a certain language that people who are rule followers, you know, the people who just do what they're told and what they're quote unquote supposed to do or what they have to do. There's a certain language that they use amongst each other. We don't have to suffer that amongst ourselves. We can talk like free people talk. So how free people talk right now is I want to show you again this story of a little bit of a story of the Real ID. Before I do that real quick though, can I just ask for a show of hands? How many people have heard of the Real ID? Just raise your hand if it's a thing yes, I know about it, I heard it. When I went to the DMV, there was a sign, they asked me if I wanted to just, you've heard of it already. I was just going to rush right in, assuming everyone's at least heard of it. Yeah, not everyone has heard of the Real ID. Okay, good. Put hands down and ask you a second question. How many people, let me put hands down first, but I'm gonna ask how many people have a Real ID already? How many people have? Lower hands. Now go ahead and raise your hands now if you have your Real ID. You got your Real ID. See, very few, very few, very few. Go ahead and open your mic if you want to say why you got your Real ID already. I'm curious, just one person. Just one person. Why would anyone get a Real ID? Of the three who had one.
If nobody else is going to talk, I will. I got it a few years ago. I thought the deadline was like 2020, and I didn't know anything about, you know, really at that time. I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to travel, and, you know, it's just something I have to do. So I didn't really, I had to get my license renewed. So there was no way to get my license renewed without getting it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So you could renew your license, and you thought that the deadline had already passed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I get a reality test why people would do that. Okay. So here it is. This is their official website, but this is what caught my eye, and this is what told me I knew I was going to do a presentation for you all when I watched this.
Wow, looking good. Thanks. Just powered up to a Real ID. Power up? So future me has X-ray vision. More like future you can fly to all 50 states, DC, and the US territories. Wait, you can fly? Sure. I'm Real ID compliant. Means now I can fly to Florida for the NASA launch today, then to Utah for the stargazing trip. Sounds good. Have fun. I'll just hang here.
Be your Real ID self by May 3rd, 2023. Make a plan at dhs.gov/realid.
So there you are. You have to make a plan to get a slave ID number from the federal government. But what's really the creepy thing about this is their ad campaign, their PR. You know, they spent a lot of money on this, and they're saying, be your Real ID self. So in the past, when we talked about IDs, it was something that you held, something that you have, something that's not you. But they want us to identify with a number. I mean, why don't we might as well do away with names altogether and just have numbers. And it's really not my cup of tea. And there's another one. Here's the second one I want you to watch again. This time watch really carefully for how they're manipulating people. There's the carrot and the stick. And remember, this is the soft coercion. You know, come next year when you want to fly across the country, you will be faced with much harsher intimidation. Here is the nice appeal.
Well, I'm looking good. Thank you. Just became a Real ID. What's the plan? Impromptu road trip? Actually, the plan is to fly to New York for today's product launch, and then visit the family in California, and cap it off with a girls' weekend in New Orleans. You really can just do all that. Sure, I'm a Real ID, so I'm good to board any domestic flight. Speaking of which, gotta fly. Nice. Enjoy. I'll be here.
Be your Real ID self by May 3rd, 2023.
I'm Real ID.
Sure, I'm a Real ID, so I'm good to board any domestic flight. Speaking of which, gotta fly. Nice. Enjoy. I'll be here.
Be your Real ID self by May 3rd.
So that's pretty creepy. And then you can go to your state. It's interesting because there is a 10th Amendment problem with the Real ID, and it's that the federal government is taking power in an area that belongs to the states. But anyway, here they go. Here's the states. They'll offer you a link to the states, which shows you who's subordinate here, in the states or the federal government. So the federal Real ID came about in 2005, but I want to show you that the Real ID is a creature of the Department of Homeland Security. So the Real ID Act, which I'll show you in a minute, vested powers in the DHS to create a Real ID and to enforce a Real ID. And here it is, Department of Homeland Security. So my research took me to this, an organization we've all heard of. It is the result, many people will say, of the 9/11 Commission's report. It was designed to address the findings, the conclusions, the advice of how to fix terrorism or whatever, how to save us from terrorism. And so the Department of Homeland Security was created. It was an enormous change to the federal government. Look at all of these original agencies that were brought under the umbrella. So when you think of a pyramid, where you used to have all of these different layers of autonomy here, now they get subsumed under one single power. I just want to show you the act that created it too. The Homeland Security Act of 2002 is what it's called. And it created Homeland Security. And you remember Homeland Security, right? When we used to have to be really afraid and then not too much afraid and then kind of afraid and then really afraid and then not so much afraid. And then I don't believe they used the color coding anymore. I think they gave that up after its utility had finished. But they still do bulletins. And this one just came out on June 7th. They still, make sure to update all of the law enforcement agencies throughout the country and all the agencies under it about its assessment of the risk to our country these days. And where it used to be mostly external, foreign adversaries that we were worried about, just as predicted by many people at the time. Their concern, as we read now in this most recent bulletin, is that in the coming months, that DHS expects the threat environment to become more dynamic as several high-profile events could be exploited to justify acts of violence against a range of possible targets. Here we go. These targets could include public gatherings, faith-based institutions, churches, racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, government facilities and personnel, U.S. critical infrastructure, the media, and perceived ideological opponents, which simply means everywhere at all times. So, and it's super vague, and it's just, if you can read on, all it says is just really government speak about how little they're doing. But if you read between the lines, they authorize themselves to do all kinds of stuff. So that's the DHS. And it again was, well, here's the actual act as it is printed in the government records. I didn't check how many pages it is. It's kind of long, but I like to sometimes just search for dollar signs and start to look, there's right there, it's $500 million to fund the fiscal year 2003. So that was the first year. So though it was the another act called the Real ID Act of 2005 that created this thing and gave it to the DHS to deal with. Yeah, 2005, here it is. And as I said earlier, they're claiming the authority to stop you from traveling between states, as if it's this weird idea that because they're the federal government, they need to protect our IDs. I'm not kidding you. The whole point of the Real ID is, as stated, is to protect your state driver's license or identity documents. That terrorists, this goes all the way back to 9/11, we're still living in the shadow of 9/11, as this Real ID is to protect our state's driver's license and identity documents from terrorist attacks and misuse by terrorists. So we're going to be kept safe from that, at least. And here is the actual text of the act as it's written. You can take a look at it. There's something interesting here is that even though it's known primarily as the Real ID Act of 2005, it's got two divisions in this, two large divisions in the act. And even before they get to the Real ID, which is in Division B, there's this Division A. Here we go. conjoined with the Real ID stuff is an emergency supplemental appropriations. That means more money for the industrial complex, the military and intelligence industrial complex. Here we have defense-related appropriations, money, 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 money. And then, oh, by the way, everybody has to get a number. So again, I like to search on dollar signs and just kind of take a peek real quick at for additional amount for the military personnel army. So here's the appropriations. These are what they tacked on to the Real ID. So yeah, here's the act again, I believe. Yeah, with Division A and Division B. But you see, in 2009, interestingly enough, in the Senate, they held a hearing. The Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Subcommittee in the United States Senate held this hearing, and a bunch of people spoke, and they're actually going to question the Real ID. It's fascinating. I need to read this. I'm a little bit stuttering because they're looking at whether the Real ID is still a good idea. And if you look at these names of the people who are speaking, Lieberman, who was at the time, I was a senator. There's all these senators on this hearing, and then these other senators speaking, and they're evoking 9/11, 9/11, 9/11, 9/11. We've got to protect the IDs because of Real ID. I want to read this one part here from Lieberman, opening statement from Joe Lieberman. He puts it pretty well in context. Good morning and welcome to this hearing where we will review the steps that the U.S. government has taken and state governments have responded to, and those steps that we may ultimately take to achieve the important national goal of keeping fraudulent state identification cards and driver's license out of the hands of terrorists and criminals. I want to welcome Secretary Napolitano. I always kick myself when I say I told you so, but I regret to say that I am not surprised we are here today when Congress adopted the so-called Real ID Act of 2005 as an amendment to a supplemental appropriations bill without hearings of any kind or any formal public vetting. We replaced a process for developing federal identification requirements that Senator Collins and I had made part of the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, the so-called 9/11 Commission legislation. So this is all online, everyone. You can read all this. There is this headline here that the ACLU opposes the Real ID. I'm investigating now the unconstitutionality of it, but I did see that some people are claiming that it infringes upon the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated in the United States by the Constitution, nor the powers not prohibited by the Constitution to the states are reserved to the states respectively and to we, the people. So that's not a job that the federal government was ordained to do in the Constitution, to print federal government IDs. It's not one of its jobs. Although they would claim that, yes, it's in the national defense, right, for our collective defense, and that is in the Constitution. So that's an interesting debate. Is it constitutional or not? But I want to hear a little bit from you all about what do you think about this? What does it represent to you? Does it mean anything? Is it ho-hum in this world of tyranny and ever constantly boiling water, getting hotter and hotter till us frogs sweat? Or are we sweating? Are you sweating a little? Go ahead and raise your hand, and I want to hear what you think about the Real ID. Are you going to eventually get one? Go ahead and raise your hand if you want to comment or add to the conversation about this very transparent attempt to control our every movement. Hello, Dolores.
Yes, I equate it to the vaccine passport.
Okay, I didn't want to say it. I wanted to see if anyone else would say it. Tell me more.
Well, it's the same way of controlling.
Mm-hmm.
They can't get people all vaccine up and just going another direction. But it's the same bottom line. You're in control, and they keep track of you.
Yes. Yes. And they can tie all kinds of conditions, right? You have to ever-growing list of conditions that you have to meet before you can have this privilege. Well, thanks for chiming in, Dolores. Who else? Certainly a scintillating topic, at least. Sizzler, this real ID amongst. Go ahead, private nobody.
Okay, this is all the more reason that people should consider divorcing the birth certificate estate. This proposed law, statute, whatever you want to call it, even when you go to the vaccine mandates, all deal with persons, not men and women. So to get around it, claim who you are and who you are not. And if you look through those proposals, amendments, whatever legislation they may put together, and look at who it applies to, it will tell you all you need to know. It's not aimed at men and women. It's aimed at United States citizens.
Very good. Absolutely. I should learn by now when I'm reading a law to go immediately first to the part where it says to whom it applies.
Exactly.
And I haven't read that part in either the Homeland Security Act nor the Real ID Act.
And a lot of times you can actually get the gist of it by looking at the definitions, because the definitions will tell you about the persons and what a person is, what an individual is. It's everything but men and women. And even when they do mention the word man in federal statutes, and even in a lot of the state, it talks about man or other animals, which means that they're equating man with animals, and that they look upon you as chattel, property. And especially under Roman civil law, under the doctrine of parens patriae, you are property of the state. That's the way they look at it. So you have to distinguish yourself. You have to set yourself apart. And one of the fastest way of doing that is first divorcing the birth certificate estate with you and joinder with it, and operate it as it was intended, as a vehicle to be able to operate in commerce, being that corporations and other fictional entities cannot have concourse with men and women. So that's why they set that up. So a little nugget there, but that's all the more reason why people should be separate. I digress.
That's not digressing. But the question was, I wanted a couple of things. I wanted to loop back and make sure we're clear how that applies to the average person who just wants to go grocery shopping or go to school across town, or just take a drive up to the lake, what have you. But now that you mentioned parens patriae, it's a Latin term, obviously. But let's spend just a little time with this, because it's a big distinction in law, and most people who follow all the traffic laws religiously because they think they have to, they're not aware of this. So do you want to help us understand it? I just randomly pulled this up. It's from legaldictionary.thefreedictionary.com. So but I see common law in bold. All of a sudden it says the parens patriae doctrine has its roots in English common law.
No, it goes all the way back to Rome.
All the way back to Rome. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, this is part of Roman civil law. And especially dealing with maritime, admiralty maritime, because it looks at people as persons, meaning property or chattel, as opposed to being freemen or just men and women.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the state basically controlling almost everything about you.
Yeah, I think patri means is like father.
Yeah, father of the state. The state as your father.
The state
Daddy.
Is your daddy state. It sounds funny to us now, but back then I was like, yeah. If
You
need
know, it's
some-
very similar to, you had the state within the Roman Empire, where you have the emperor or you have the king, basically being the sovereign over the people.
Yeah, and
So,
roadways belong to the king. All of the roadways belong to the king, right?
yeah. Yeah, and the peasants, basically had to get permission or pay tax to use it. So no, the concept is very old and it's being utilized with super sophistication of modern technology to micromanage now, where they couldn't do that so much back then, but with computers and the like, they can actually micromanage life if you allow them to.
If you allow them to, yeah, the technological era is making it pretty evident that things could get hot real fast for us. So let's hear from Stephen. What do you think about that real ID?
Well, I just want to say hi to Private Nobody. It's been a long time since I've heard from him. He's very well informed. Somebody asked a question, what's the difference between the real ID and our normal driver's license? Well, they're all being transitioned to that. That's what I have been to many states and have lived in many states. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I'll disclose that. And that's where I call him Senseless Brenner. He's the man that drafted this real ID. He's the one that drafted the real ID. Sensenbrenner.
Sensenbrenner.
I call him Senseless Brenner. He's a lifelong politician is what he is. Another multi-millionaire from being involved in government
Service, supposedly. Yeah, so let's take a minute to introduce you. Thanks for being here. David James Rodriguez introduced us and proposed we have you. I looked at your website. Let's see. This is a confab, Stephen, though. We're creating it as a way to get in as many voices as we can, to get everybody really thinking and through what it takes to be a free traveler, the choices that we want to make in terms of how we want to deal with the state and the vehicle code and all that stuff. So we've been meeting this every month now for this is our 4th month. And
yeah, I read the website. It's great that you're doing it. And I saw that you had Rick Martin on there, and he's one of the foremost. You had a video of Rick, and he's in Texas, and what did he get, a Lamborghini because of his?
I think it was some county. He's like, yeah, thanks so-and-so county for my Lamborghini.
I think, yeah. So yeah, he's really on the forefront of this. I've been traveling without a driver's license for 14 years.
Okay.
People wonder how I get on planes.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer your real ID question, I was actually in Boston, had a delay, and I was treated like you should be treated. So I had a delay, so I decided I'm going to go back, ask for the head of TSA. By the way, think about that. That's Transportation Safety Authority. Their whole mission is to make sure that you're safe getting on that plane. They have no other authority. They might act like they do. I'll give a quick story about what one TSA agent tried to do in a minute. But so I asked this head of the TSA in Boston, I said, I want to thank you for how your staff handled. I fly selectee status, and that's select with 2 E's on that. It's like trustee, but it's selectee. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So I'll finish my story. And I said to him, I said, I just have a question for you. This real ID thing is coming down the pike. And I said, do you think someone such as myself is going to have an issue? Because I don't consent to have a government ID, nor do I want one, because I explain more. And he goes, no, you won't have any trouble. But I actually met David at Float Fest in Texas, and he was a speaker. I had a workshop, and I concur. I think a confab, a conversation is the best way to do it. So if anyone has a question of what I share, I'd be happy to, raise your awareness of, and I believe in all this is paying it forward. I learned, I've been mentored. I spent years and years researching. I got down the rabbit hole back in the 90s when the state started coming after my business. And I learned about, you know, the whole traveling thing from a friend of mine in New Mexico. But everything takes an impetus moment. And that impetus moment is what then drives you to go research and then take the time to make sure that you can walk that walk. If you can't walk the walk, I tell people, don't get rid of a driver's license. You have to, first of all, know how to do it. You can't just let it expire. I'll come back to that in a minute again, but you have to be able to walk that walk, because when you get pulled over, how are you going to handle that? How are you going to handle that roadside stop? If you're not equipped, good luck. And I'd even talked to a guy at the Float Fest, and he contacted me immediately afterwards. He go, I got stopped and I tried. I'm like, well, yeah, you went into making claims and you went into argument, and that's not the proper way to handle those public servants. So I'll go back to what I was saying. What you have to do is you have to rescind the driver's license. So every state has a form that you can do that. You have to rescind it if you want to do that walk. And the reason you have to rescind it is because that's giving notice that you're no longer consent to their privileges and benefits. When I did that, I got a letter. At first they weren't going to let me do it. And that's a whole nother story, because I had the license suspended because I had a ticket. That was my impetus moment when I said enough is enough. And I never paid that fine. And that dragged on. I mean, that's another whole can of worms. If you have something out there currently, you can't rescind it and then have it go away, because you were under their auspice during that time frame. So clean up your mess and then rescind the driver's license. So once you rescind it, now you are giving them notice that you're no longer in their game. And when I got the letter, it said you could regain your driving privileges. It mentioned it like 7 times in that letter to me. If you'd ever like to regain your driving privileges, I was like, no, thank you. I don't call it a right to travel. I call it a necessity of man, because our rights are, I mean, George Carlin has a whole bit on rights. I mean, and Private Nobody was hitting a very important fact. The only thing that can be a citizen, and I wrote an article that's on my blog, the 5 words used to control and enslave you, those words are a person, a citizen, a resident, a driver, and a passenger. You are none of those by definition. A person is a legal entity. A citizen is someone who is beholden onto the matrix, the state. The resident is a res identified. So a thing, res is thing identified. You want to be a thing identified? A driver is someone who's like an Uber driver or a taxi driver. And none of us are usually that. I mean, you can be. And then a passenger is someone who pays a fare, like a train, a plane, so yes, you can be a passenger if you're out in commerce, but you're not never going to be a passenger if you're in your friend's car or your family car. So
The real ID is real in some sense.
oh,
right?
sure, yeah.
So I mean, you've probably been asked this question, in lots of different ways. What do we do? And if you have a good answer, it's great. I understand it's a monster we're dealing with, but what do we do with the real ID? Do we go down to the DMV and sign up for it? Do we?
No. I mean, if you, yeah, well, of course, if you want to continue to be in the matrix, you want to be in the system, by all means. If you have had enough, I'll go to this, Clint.
I've had enough.
Yeah. Okay. So here it is in a nutshell. We're on a monopoly board. You're the player. You're the player, and the token is the legal fiction. You need that legal fiction to move around that monopoly board, but They try to get you in joinder, is what the private nobody had mentioned earlier. Or, you know, they need you to join. They need joinder to get you to admit that you're the name, or you're the person, or you're the citizen. The minute they get joinder, they have
Ball game
jurisdiction and they're
over.
done. Game over.
Ball game over.
Ball game over. So I can give you an example. I had a recent stop. I was in Texas and I was out hiking on my way back, and I had no clue that I was in on a highway that is a drug trafficking highway. I learned this because, you know, I told other people what was going on. Oh yeah, that's a major drug thoroughfare up from Mexico through Texas. And I was pulled over by a canine unit. And the way he pulled behind my car, I was like, I don't like this. So I pulled into a gas station, and then he flipped on his lights. I was already at the pump. And he said, we're going to have to deal with this first. And I looked at him and I said, excuse me, what is this about? He goes, oh, you know, you're going to have to deal with this. I said, what did I do? He goes, you didn't turn on your right blinker. I was like, really? So I could tell you the whole long version, but I'll keep it as short as I can. That he asked for an ID, you know, he asked for a driver's license, and I just kept on asking. The key is to always ask questions. We're the people, and they're the public servants. So there's a guy, I forget his name, but he uses the phrase "as king." If you're not ask king the questions, or ask queen, ask questions, because as king, you're the sovereign. I mean, that's a terrible word to use out in the public, because they will. I was once asked by a TSA agent, "Are you a sovereign citizen?" I looked at him and I said, "That's an oxymoron." I said, "Can the queen be a sovereign citizen?" And then he shut up. So again, I asked questions. So to make a long story short, this police officer ended up handcuffing me because I kept on asking him questions. I made one mistake. I diverted from my own created script, and that's why I was in handcuffs. And then he said, well, do you have, you know, I need to see an ID. I said, well, I have one in my, you know, my wallet, and I created my own. If you get to the stage where you're ready to walk this walk, you should be able to create your own ID.
Correct.
So I handed him that. He unhandcuffed me. I grabbed my wallet off his hood, and he looked. The first thing he said is, well, that's not a government ID. And I looked at him and I said, are we not the government? And then he went through his questions, and I started asking him questions again. And the long story short was, he knew that I had way too much to think. He was asking questions, I was asking questions, and I told him, I said, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to create joinder. I said, I'm not going to participate in that. And I go, you can ask all the questions you want. I said, do you have any other questions? Because I said, we're not going to go that route. I said, and then I said, you know, you're going to keep on detaining me here? And then he started asking other questions. And then I was still going to have some fun with him. He asked me where I was that day. And I said, well, if you must know, I was hiking. And then I blah, 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 blah. And then he asked me, were you, because of what I have, I still travel with plates, simply because if you don't, you stick out like a sore thumb. I mean, Rick is very bold, and I give him credit for that. And he sued him and won, so they maybe leave him alone. But I don't like that extortion that they play. But I feel like I'm blending in, and it's probably the easiest way to handle, you know, not getting pulled over all the time. So he said, were you in that state today? And I said, or last night? I said, no. He goes, where did you sleep last night? And I literally said to him, are you hitting on me, officer? And he didn't answer that. Well, later on, he asked 3 times, different ways, how do you pronounce your last name? I said, you mean the family name? He goes, yeah, how do you pronounce it? I said, I don't care. And he kept on asking. The third time I said to him, I said, I don't care what you call me as long as you don't call me late for lunch. So you got to have fun with these guys. And then, that was the end of it. I mean, he basically wrote up a warning and, that I was off. So
I guess what we need to do is not get a real ID and then deal with the consequences at the roadside.
Well, you really should be coached on how to deal with that. And I mean, I could get some stuff to David, but here's what I shared at the float festival. I said the very first thing you should do is just leave your ID at home and go get on a plane. And if you can, if you can travel like that, and then go up and say you want to fly selectee status. Now you're practicing standing in your power, putting the fear on the back burner, and then seeing how they handle you. Because what selectee status is for flying on a plane means that you're giving them permission to pat you down, and you're not going to find it on their site. I mean, you might, but I doubt it.
Okay.
They don't want to advertise that.
So it's not the same as secondary security screening selection?
Well, there you go. Automatic selectee or the selectee list. But see, there is no list known as a selectee. The passages may be known as selectee, comma. So selectee. There, you proved me wrong. So yeah, it's a secondary. So they pat you down. They open up your travel bag, look through everything, and do some magical wand through it, and then off you. And I laughed. At one time, I said to the guy, I said, obviously you don't trust your machines there for your screenings if you have to open up my bag and do it again. No comment.
Wow, you do have fun with them.
So yeah, I mean, and I saw a woman one time in front of me. She was in a wheelchair, and they were going to wheel her into a special room and pat her down because she was like in her 80s. I'm like, really, people? And the guy, the man, probably the son, got really angry with him, and he made some comment. I said, you really think we're in a free country? So as far as the Constitution, the Constitution, if you don't know who Lysander Spooner is, L.Y. Sanders Spooner, Lysander Spooner, he wrote a great treatise on it. It doesn't apply to any of us unless you took an oath to it, or you're an officer who took an oath to it. It's a debt compact.
Correct.
So they took an oath to it, but no one even has taken a proper oath. That's a whole nother conversation, but I'll give you a quick 2 things that a proper oath mean. And I have this on my blog. Everyone takes an oath with invocation, calling upon God, but they don't take an oath with imprecation, meaning if you break your oath, there are consequences. You think a judge is going to take that type of oath? You think a police officer is going to take that type of oath? No way. No way.
What's the name of it again? Oath of
invocation and imprecation. 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 So they have to, that's a proper oath. Again, I studied law dictionaries for years. I had a mentor who we spent years on a phone. I never met the man. He lived in Louisiana, but he was a genius as far as law. And there's a difference between law and legal too. That's what people don't understand. Law is
big difference.
Exactly. So that's legal is all legalese. That's what attorneys practice. That's statutes, that's codes. Law is natural law, universal law, common law. So there's your difference.
Yeah, you could assume a pretty well-educated group here. But I'm going to ask, because I forgot at the beginning, who's first time tonight? Who's a first timer? Anybody new? Anybody unfamiliar with the basic distinctions of law versus legal, statutory realm versus common law versus? Okay.
So that's good. That's good.
We pretty much cover that in all of our courses.
if you put up the blog, it's simply not prc.blogspot.com, and then you go to articles.
Oh,
It's-
right, of course.
Yeah. So, but the biggest non-disclosure is the passenger word. They don't disclose the fact that passenger is what it is, because it would expose their whole game. I actually called, I don't know how many insurance companies. I said, I don't carry passengers, and I really don't even have a motor vehicle. That's another commercial term. I said, I'd like to get insurance. And they all said, oh, no, there's nothing such like that. I said, do you put that in writing? No, they wouldn't do that. So,
This is my favorite cartoon. It's
yeah,
it's so funny. I was looking all over for it, and then because I was preparing for this, I found it.
that's a great thing.
I mean, it's the whole world is right there in a picture.
Isn't that great? Yeah, it is. And that's about consent. That one guy's giving up consent.
Mm-hmm.
Or I mean, he's not giving up. He's saying, no, I'm not going to play this game anymore.
He's taking his time and attention elsewhere.
Yeah. And I wrote this a long, long time ago. This is an article that I put together about the fact that they're all tricksters. They don't disclose. But it does give an idea. I mean, Regis is from the king.
Mhm.
If you look at the part you have highlighted, certification, this is actually on the title. And they make everyone check that you're a commercial carrier. I further certify knowledge of blah, 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 motor vehicle carrier codes. Well, there is no checkoff spot on there. So you could actually cross that out and go, no, I'm not a commercial carrier.
Cross it, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, cross it out.
Fantastic. So everyone check out this box. I encourage you to explore. It looks like you've got quite a lot of things here. You have the top 12. Well, sounds
Well,
curious.
that's something I came up with on a walk. But yeah, banks don't lend money. There's a lot of, and War Powers Act is something that everyone definitely should read.
Yes.
These are things that if I had to download 12 things to people, that would be what I would.
Okay. Oh, I see. Of all the millions of links that people get inundated with in a day, these are your top 12.
Yeah, that's my top 12.
I'm going to prioritize them.
And look I have a proper oath on there. See, top 12, they had a proper oath.
Ooh.
And I liked the Justinian Deception. That's the gentleman out of Australia. The Distinguished Gentleman, of course, is a movie where it just shows that everything out there in DC is a lobbyist game. This is my top 12 that if I could hand something to somebody and go, here's a wide variety of topics. Have fun.
You're doing it right now. You're handing it to the people who are here. So let's see.
Well, I'm grateful, and I could go on, but I would recommend that you watch if you're on a laptop or a computer, because it does not work very well on the phone.
Okay. Check out banking and government, suggested books, movies to watch. Fantastic. This is better than any Netflix series I could binge.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job. So
Stephen, I appreciate your work.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
Seeing you around.
So yeah, let's have a little convo, shall we? A little confab. David's here. Say hi, David.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Yes, I have poor reception. Hey, Stephen.
Hey,
So my video's not working. New location, but this is the place to be, man. Great to see all you guys here learning about this stuff, and we're all learning from each other. So, yeah, great to be with you all.
Great. Yeah, we're gonna do some questions about what Stephen just laid down, and with focus on free traveling, hopefully. We said it from the beginning, if you learn the dynamics of how the DMV and associated statutes defraud us, you learn how they do it across the board. It's the same formula, same tricks and techniques. What do you say? T-Dub. T-Dub. Oh, I see.
Hey, how you doing?
To recognize the name. Welcome.
Don't tell anybody. I shouldn't hang out with you, dangerous people.
Dangerous to the system.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what. Yeah. Anyway, real quick, I was just curious about the challenge of renting a car without a DL. obviously.
Very good question.
I would think,
I've never
yeah, go
tried.
ahead.
I've never
Okay.
tried. So I'll just be
Okay.
honest. That's why I'm sure Uber would be the way to go, but
Yeah.
I've never paid for Uber myself. So I think that would be a major challenge, but then again, it all depends on who you're in front of.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to consider.
I can chime in for what someone else did. I've never done this personally. What they did essentially was what Stephen had stated about revoking the
Rescinding
rescinding, excuse me,
Yeah.
Rescinding the
DL.
DL, and then, and not only stop there, but to also cancel the accounts associated with it. That was something I recently learned about. Once that is totally canceled out, reapply, but this time you would do it in paper. You don't want to do it online. And also have an explanatory statement to go along with it, very similar to what you do with the passport, to establish your man or woman status. Some people go far as state, national, or what have you. I don't even like to use that anymore. Or if I do use state, national, I say state, national by nativity, not taking on a political status, because I don't want no attachment whatsoever. Then take that in, and within an explanatory statement, you will be explaining that this will be for commercial use only. There's a clear division between the office holder, because we know they can't recognize the man or woman, and the principal being the birth certificate of state. And it would only be used, like you just mentioned, with renting a car, or if you're actually doing commercial work as a quote driver, then you would use it for that. But for any other purposes, you wouldn't even carry it with you or anything like that. According to this person, it definitely worked for him, and it kept him separate. And even when the cops would run it, you know, they would acknowledge it and move on their way. So as long as he's not in joinder, remember you were talking about, Stephen, how that cop tried diligently to get you into joinder, because generally the joinder is when, as soon as you hand over the ID, you're done. Everything else is just for show.
Their ID.
Yeah, their ID, correct. Because when most people signed up for it, they didn't realize that they were in joinder with the estate and that they admitted that they're a US citizen. And so they're deep, deep, deep into the system without even knowing it. So with the tags, and you're handing over the ID, you submit it to the jurisdiction, and you're pretty much toast at that point. This was one way to get around it for people who wanted to rent cars, and that would be a commercial endeavor. So that's just food for thought. I don't pretty much go down that route, but that's an option. Because people do that with the passport to clearly distinguish the man from the person, and that you're only the bearer and not the principal. And we get them through. And
Yes.
people are treated just like you mentioned about when you go through the airport, they're treated much different than the regular US citizen.
Well, I'm going to try to travel this fall without a passport, because I don't.
That can be done.
Yeah, I know it can be done. And the reason it can be done is, first of all, they can never properly present me.
No.
So that's one of the languages I'm going to use. And then the second thing is, people will say, well, you know, that's not a real ID. I said, well, but who better than myself to know who I am?
Exactly.
And I
Until
don't mean a
somebody
real
deems otherwise.
Yeah. So I don't mean a real ID like we're talking about earlier. I'm talking about like, oh, it's a real government ID. So I actually have two IDs, one that says government ID on it, and then I created it. And then the other one's one that's actually it's like a credit card. It's hard plastic like that. I have printed out. That's what I show at the airports. That's what I show at hotels if they ask. Most of the time, if you travel and you already have pre-checked in, I haven't even had a show. And I operate through a trust, so everything's through a trust.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any issues. I mean, you manifest what you manifest. So anyway.
I love it. I love it. It always comes down to who you are and your attitude, because you know who you are. All right, who else has any comment or question for this conversation that Stephen has initiated uh, around non-compliance and your ID? How about, what is it? Okay, we've got renting a car, we've got, and what are the other things that are required for, you need a driver's license for? So many things.
Well, you know, even getting, one time I walked into a Walgreens, I wanted to get some wine or something, and they wouldn't. I'm way over 21, and they required, so I just left it on the counter. I said, well, I'll take my business elsewhere, and I left it, and I left. So.
Yeah, exactly. You always have that option. All right. So thanks, T-Dub, for being here. Good to see you. I have a poll I'd love to do. How many people here would be willing to get rid of their driver's license and or your car registration if you knew that you wouldn't, quote unquote, get in trouble? If you knew that, just as Stephen said, is what you get, what you manifest, would you do it?
Well, I can't answer that question because I never had one and refused to get it. And
Who
I
is
still-
Mark? Who is Mark? He seems to be an antagonist in here. Stephen, you'll miss your flights and end up in county lockup. We want your time and your money. Well, I had 2 sheriff deputies one time. A rogue TSA agent called 2 deputies, and he was going to have them, you know, interview me. Well, you know, I educated them and I wished them well. And I said, you know, they said, don't you find this whole not having an ID difficult? And I said, actually not. I get to meet 2 nice guys like you. And that's it. That was the end of it. And they turned around to the TSA guy and go, he's good. And he was angry.
Oh,
He was angry.
well, what a gem. That's like the 3rd gem that you've laid down. It just transcends the whole situation, the power dynamics. You just rise above it, don't you? Like a king. I love it.
Yeah. And you have to, if you stand in your power, you know that you are the king or the queen, then and you have to be pleasant, you have to be kind. I mean, treat others as you want to be treated. The golden guideline. I'm not going to call it the rule, golden guideline.
Even though they're not treating you the way you want to be
Exactly. But you know, still act in love. They're resonating in a low vibration of fear. So because they're more fearful of you than you realize, because
Exactly.
they're not used to having someone that powerful stand in front of them. Trust me, they are not comfortable. You're making them uncomfortable. You're making them nervous, and they don't know what to do with you. So then
Yeah.
you usually are passed on to a supervisor. And if you ever feel like you're being mistreated, say, you know, I realize that you might be uncomfortable. Could you please go get your supervisor for me? Because I said, maybe he or she will be, I had that happen at a hotel. They were being, you know, really uncomfortable. And I could tell. I said, you know, you've been very nice. And by the origin of the word nice is ignorant. So it's a hard word to get out of our vocabulary, but go look it up. The etymology of the word nice means ignorant. Anyway, so the supervisor came, and then he said, you know what, I'm going to put in the system that you're not to be asked for an ID the whole rest of your stay. And that was the end of it. And I didn't. So, I mean, it's all about how you posture yourself, you know, kill them with kindness, sugar and spice, everything nice.
And see what you just stated there, Stephen, it goes to show you that they have options for people like us that they don't readily let people know about, because for him to even do that and to put that into the system, there had to be provisions for that.
There always are provisions. I mean, that's, you know, a policy has their guidelines, but there's always someone that can override that policy if they have the authority. And so many underlings are not empowered to do so. I have that happen all the time. And, you know, some people are like, you're such a Karen. I'm like, oh, please.
No, you're not.
No, just the
No, you're
opposite of a
not.
Karen.
If I was in the same situation you're describing, I would be the Karen. I wouldn't say, you look like you've had a hard day. Can I talk to you? I'd be like, where's your, what do you mean? There's your, I want to talk to your supervisor. You get out of here. I would easily turn into a Karen. So thank you for modeling this attitude. I'd like to be more like you.
it's not, you're not, again, it's not a complaint. You have a concern, or you have, they're not walking in power themselves. And then you're modeling this in front of these people. Then they're gonna go, wow. I mean, so that's really what it is. It's, and I can't, after all the years of research, I can't live any other way. I mean, this is who I am. I mean, so and it's not going to be everybody's walk. Not everybody this is Earth School, and you have your assignment on Earth School, this journey. Who knows if we're here multiple times? I mean, there's plenty of evidence that there is a reincarnation to some degree. That's a whole nother topic. But anyway, model your
multiverses.
Model your mission, model your path, be honorable in your path, and then, walk that walk. If you feel that you're going to be more comfortable having a government ID, there's nothing wrong with that. That's your path. There's no harm, no foul. So not everybody has the desire to do what I do. And I have, that's not judgment. That's just, everyone has their walk. That's it.
I was talking to Clint earlier, and that very sentiment I brought to his attention. I said that if you had a group of 100 people, maybe 10 will go down this road. It's not for everybody. And it's so true in my experience of about 34 years now.
Good. Well, 10% is a lot of people. I noticed a couple of people put their hands down. Don't be shy. Go ahead, T-Dub.
I was just raising my hand to answer your question about how many people would give up their license. That was an old hand raise.
And have you got a plan? The Real ID people on their advertising says, make a plan. Real ID.
My plan is always to not participate.
Ignore it. Is that what you mean, or what? Or like,
yeah, and I think one thing that I don't know, it's sort of been mentioned here. Actually, I believe we mentioned it on this call, but sending in the lawful notification letters, right? Letting them know. I mean, you guys, we've already mentioned that, I think, on this call, but that's what I plan to do, to notify them. I think that was a great method that we just went through when I asked that question, about revoking your license and then coming back and getting it specifically for what it was intended for commercial purposes. I plan to do that. That's really a beautiful plan, and something that I think makes a lot of sense. So thanks for that information.
Just so you know, it's rescind, because the revoke is not the terms they use. So
rescind or rescission.
Yep.
Great. Thanks so much for that. It's good stuff.
I love it. What wealth of knowledge we have here. So if you have any more questions for Stephen, we do want to create some space for folks who are actively in the middle of fighting a ticket or in some court proceedings, perhaps. It'd be great to get some real life stories. Give us an update or tell us what happened when you tried this, you tried that.
Well, good evening. My name is Kimberly McFarland. How you doing?
Hi, Kimberly.
Hi. I was invited. This is my first time attending your session. I was invited by Steve. He was on the Clubhouse 2 weeks ago, and I was speaking in the Clubhouse about a number of things that I have been experiencing on the spiritual level, as well as what I've been doing in the courts. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about my story, if that would be okay, as well as some things that I'm doing currently that I'm attempting to get a community to see from a different perspective on how we can deal with this issue of our government and how they're controlling us.
Yeah, great. We're orbiting around the topic of the freedom, the necessity of a man and a woman to move about on the roadways, and maybe also airplanes and stuff, but mostly road stuff. Have you ever had a ticket? Have you fought a ticket? Do you have a driver's license? Do you register your car?
Well, what I have done is I've applied to become a state national. And so I'm I'm transitioning through that process. And one of the things that I am currently doing in the courts is I've challenged the Constitution.
Challenge the Constitution.
Yes, there's a whole process called the single subject rule where you can challenge. It's a whole process. You challenge the Constitution. You send the letter into the Attorney General, who has 60 days, especially if you have a court case, and you have 60 days to respond to it. So I question, how do statutes, codes, and ordinances apply to the living man? And I also question, on state and federal level, their oath of office, and I bind them to their oath of office in their fiduciary capacity as far as the living man and woman and child is concerned.
Hey,
Kimberly, I think we definitely want to hear about this. I think we want, but before we do that, I want to again create some space for folks who are currently facing a ticket, fine, or if you're in court, if you want to talk to us about your personal actual experience. You know, those people who are facing the intimidation firsthand right now because of unlawful traffic citation or even parking tickets and toll bridges and red light cameras.
Clint, I can tell them really quick. The thing that people don't think about is there's an inherent 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 conflict of interest, because whoever issued the ticket, whoever the prosecutor is and the judge, they all work for the plaintiff. So that really should be the very first question that you ask. How can I possibly get a fair hearing when there's an inherent conflict of interest?
Good one.
Yep.
Staring us right in the face. How did I miss that?
Exactly. And I just quickly want to mention, Kimberly, they won't be answering any of your questions and they'll ignore you. Sorry, dear, but they're never going to answer your questions. So it sounds good on paper, but they're not going to answer you.
Okay, Trisha.
Yes. Yeah, so I got my ticket in December and I did that 72-hour rescission or whatever, I forget what that's called, but that they just ignored that. And then I did the conditional acceptance letters and followed it all the way through to default and estoppel, and they just ignored that, even though they had them all listed on the docket. But it looks like they removed some of them. They're not all on there now. But then they sent me a failure to appear, which makes no sense, because how can they say I didn't appear if I've sent them, I sent them the conditional acceptance letters and they didn't respond to it, and they had a duty to respond to me and they ignored it. So now I think Sue Ann was working on something for me, but I have to have some kind of response by the 14th. So I have 1 week and I have to get it to them by next week, but I
have a suggestion for her. I use IRS form F56. It's a fiduciary form that you can make them the fiduciary of the trust name. And then now they're obligated to speak with you if you are communicating with them from the living man or woman. Have you given them affidavits? It's a couple of things that can be done. And I know that even the constitutional challenge will stop any court case on the spot. And so that's something, it's a very simple process, and it's something you may want to consider putting it on the records before you go back into their venue.
Will that help me in this situation?
Yes, ma'am. I'm telling you what I'm doing right now actively. It works.
What was the name of that form again, Kimberly?
It's called, the form is the IRS F56 form. As you know, they have us listed as debtors, right? Debtors. The IRS system is based on debits and credits. There is no money. And so because we are acting out a persona with the straw man name or the driver's license name, then they are acting as administrators of the trust name. So you have to let them know that you know that you are the beneficiary of the trust. And it's their responsibility to make sure that that trust is in good standing and to help and not to cause any harm or injury. So until we start using the forms that is out there and available for us to use, they can't speak to us because we're not on their level. You have to become the executrix or the executor of your estate, and you have to deal with them, the public officials that are on that level, and they have forms. And as you know, they use the forms to trick us with the first name and last name versus what shows up on the passport under the surname and the given name. So there are forms out there that we could use to slow down the process until we can all begin to do these things in mass numbers or bring people aware of how to put this government in check. The IRS is not our enemy. They are the messenger in between the debtor and the credit. And there are forms available for us to utilize to stop what is going on. Of course, you may have the few that are going to run rogue because of different states or whatever the case may be. But when we realize what we can do collectively and then going into the courts, 2, 3 at a time, taking pictures, whatnot, then we can support one another as witnesses to the crimes that are being committed on the people. It's all at the district level, the court level, the commissioners, they're the ones that are managing us, and the mayors and the sheriff. It's at that level that we have to put all those people in check and then go to the superior judge and the state attorney general and invoke our rights. This is what we have to do.
All before she gets arrested for not showing up, right?
Yeah.
Was I reading your mind or what, Trisha?
Yes, I know. I'm like, my head is just spinning because
one more thing I want to say. You have to go in there under duress, coercion, and fear of life. You are that's how you walk in there. That stops anything, because at that point.
Well, I signed my ticket under duress, and that doesn't seem to have done anything.
What state are you in, ma'am?
California.
Oh my God.
Mafia state.
The worst, that's a communist state.
I know.
We know.
Trust me, I've been here long enough.
Trisha, one thing I want to ask you, when you did your conditional acceptance, did you return the ticket with it?
No, I returned the ticket. Wait, I sent a copy of the ticket, but I sent
No, the original ticket.
Yes, I sent it to the officer when I did the 72-hour rescission or whatever that was called. But because I sent the conditional acceptance letters to the judge, this presiding judge of Ventura County, and the officer and the DA. So I wouldn't be able to send the original to all three anyway, even if I had it.
No, it's generally the way, because I use the conditional acceptance, and like I said, I have 100%, but it's done at the beginning with the original instrument in tow. So after you do that, you're no longer holding the hot potato. If you don't have the hot potato and you gave it back there, it's no case.
Well,
you have to consent. You have to consent. And right now, it sounds like you're consenting by responding to all of these different things that they're sending you without you having the hot potato. They have the ticket.
I mean, exactly what are you saying?
It sounds like, based on the little that I know,
the officer has the ticket.
Okay. Was that ever expressed in your conditional acceptance? How can you conditionally accept without returning it with the conditional acceptance letter? Because generally, when we do conditional acceptance
letters.
Okay, there's two things we normally attack: the name and the person. If they can explain that, we will accept, which they never can.
Yeah.
In this system, to stop most things, you have to challenge them on the name and the person. If they can say that the person is you and the name is you, then they got something, but we know they can't. That's basically the only thing that you can do prior to doing the separation process. You can challenge the name. You are not a name and a name is not you.
Yeah.
The only way that can happen is if you're enjoined with it. And that's what they tricked us into. And a lot of things Kimberly says, I'm very familiar with it, and a
Hang
lot
on,
of it
so
is
let's-
true.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, okay, so what you said to Tricia is that she might have attached the original citation with the conditional acceptance.
No,
when
she didn't. She said she gave it to the officer.
Right. So you were saying she shouldn't have, or she might have, or I'm not sure what exactly, but the question is, what does she do now?
I don't know where her paperwork, what she stated in her paperwork to put her in joinder with this situation, because once she
Right.
returned the ticket, there's no joinder.
So yeah, so she's literally telling us her real life story, and
Yeah.
great opportunity for everyone to learn about all the ins and outs of these things. But Trish is literally looking for concrete, specific, like the very next thing to do. If anybody has a suggestion like that, please chime in.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to, advise without knowing what she did in black and white, because she might have committed herself to the point that she might as well pay the fine.
Well, as I stated before, and I concur with that, but she could try the inherent conflict of interest.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, try the inherent conflict of interest, say that I just realized that there's a huge inherent conflict of interest here, that the plaintiff, the prosecutor, and the police officer all work for the plaintiff. How could I possibly get a fair hearing? You're asking a question.
Who does she ask that of?
She's gonna ask that, and put that in the record make it a special appearance.
So she asks a judge and
The court, no, not ask, just make it a special appearance to the court.
Okay, which is
Now, is that done in writing or is that a physical?
Yeah, I handwrite it. I would handwrite it. You want to make a caption of you know how to put a court document together? You put, the plaintiff, you know how to do that?
I mean, I don't really have I don't really have experience doing that.
Okay, well, the header is the plaintiff versus the defendant. Write it in all capital letters. Put a box around it. Put the case number on it. Now below that, right, I have one question. How can I possibly get a fair hearing when there's an inherent conflict of interest? Since the judge, the prosecutor, and the police officer all work for the plaintiff. Sincerely, and this is how you all should be signing your name: by : your full name, all rights reserved below that, so they don't, and then put A period, R period after your signature, which means authorized representative. And then below all that, you can write beneficiary for the all cap. That's really how all of us should be signing our name. That's you're letting them know that you're the living being, and that you're there on behalf of the all capital. Because the only thing that can appear in those courts, the only thing that's summoned into those courts is the fictions.
That's correct.
So you can't appear as a living woman or man in their courts. Can't. They don't see it. They'll be told then you'll be told that you didn't appear. I'm here as a living man. Well, well, good luck for that. I don't go to court. Never would, unless they're dragging me.
Right.
So that's my suggestion.
Thanks, Stephen, for being here, taking the time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah. All right, everyone say goodbye to Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Stephen. Great job, man. Talk to you
Bye.
soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.
Hi, this is Karine from Los Angeles, California.
Hey, Karine. Welcome.
I'm in Los Angeles County, and I challenged a ticket in court by telling them that I didn't want a commissioner, I wanted a judge to hear.
Thank you very much. Please come back. We've got Tricia still here. So I just want to loop back with you, Tricia, hear all these comments. They were fire hosing you.
I know, it's like, I'm kind of, well, this is one thing I was thinking though, is if I mean, I don't want to go to court, but if I did go to court and the officer showed up, can't I say, hey, I have this notice of default that he's in receipt of and notice of estoppel. He, you know, this is a moot point right now. There's nothing to discuss because he had his chance to respond and he didn't. So how is he
Anybody?
testifying or whatever?
The court will manipulate your name.
I know, that's why I don't want to go in, because
You need to go in there. Come on now. Motion to dismiss, lack of jurisdiction, lack of corpus delicti, and then we have the common law. Okay. It's a 1, 2, 3 punch.
so I file a motion. Wait, let me.
You
challenge
would
jury-
need that paperwork that you're not going to get from anywhere else. You do not have this jurisdiction. Whoever say you owe us money or say that you've harmed us, you know, corpus delicti, I didn't bang your police car. I didn't, you know, that sort of thing.
Right.
You challenge them. If everybody challenged them, they'd be out of business.
Yes, good. So David, you want to tell us about your situation?
I do have court on June 15th. This is called the Trial Readiness Conference, and I am facing multiple misdemeanors and these 2 felonies that are trumped up. You can find the details at freedavid.org. And this is the third Trial Readiness Conference. And the first one, I requested more time to do research and such. The second time, and they extended it like 6 weeks. And the second time I challenged jurisdiction, they extended it 3 months. And now here we are. This is the third Trial Readiness Conference. And what happens is that I show up, and because I knew I was going to be not in that location, not near their court, I requested Zoom permission. And thankfully, the judge allowed it. So this is one of the takeaways, is that make a list of requests before you go into court or to Zoom, and make the smallest requests early and the bigger requests later. I think that's my method, so I can at least get something small, which I need, or the most important requests. And so now the paperwork, which I was supposed to send in yesterday, and I'll probably get it in tonight. I come across a guy talking about the QSIP numbers, and this is a contact. I'm not sure where I should say I got the contact, but you know, this is a financial game, right? This is all about money. This is all about racketeering. This is all about using our physical body as collateral. And so I pay this guy a little bit of money. He had some research done, and he allegedly found my court case number connected to a investment fund, and that's going to be one of the approaches on the 15th. Is I'm going to request, first of all, let the judge know, Your Honor, it appears to be there's some fraud connected with this case number. We've done some private investigation research and found out that this case number is linked to this fund in the amount of XYZ. And so my first request, Your Honor, is who in this court has a securities license and who authorized the bonding of this case. So I'm going to request the instruction I got was to request for discovery, which I think I should have done, you know, a while ago, but I'm young and practicing law, my friend. So this is what it is. When I decided to do right to travel for 3 years ago, and the reason I did right to travel is because I wanted to know what happens. You know, like some people had there's theories. And so I said, screw it. I don't want to be a slave. I don't want to tell my kids I was afraid and a coward. I want to try. I want to make an effort. And so this is the sustainment of speeding tickets and not identifying myself. And this is, I put it in the videos there. Some of you guys have seen it on the DMV. Don't Fear the DMV course. We go through it in massive detail, and Clint and Sue Ann do a great job. And we all had a great time and great conversation and paperwork and everything there. So I can't go over the details, but the reason I have these, felonies is because I didn't show up in court, and I was helping open up the beaches and maskless shopping with this COVID scamdemic. And so all of a sudden they see David Rodriguez, this guy's live streaming, he's exposing this. So I became persona non grata by the local county DA. Okay, so I say that so kind of a little bit what's happening here. And so I'm going to make a request about the discovery for the QSIP and the bond information, who has a securities license. And then that's one approach. And the other approach is to submit a writ of prohibition and a writ of mandamus. And I haven't completed those yet. And I'm kind of being a little bit slow on it because I haven't got all the support that I needed. But this is what happens. This is the world that I live in. This is the world I created for myself. And I have to face whatever I need to face. So this is my strategy right now. And thankfully, I don't have to be there physically, but I'm going to try to extend it as much as possible. And this is someone else out there. If you have court cases, you're allowed to waive your right to a speedy trial. One guy said, I told him, I said, hey, man, I got trial in a week or two. He says, well, do you want to go to trial? I said, no. He says, why don't you waive your right to a speedy trial and try to negotiate something? Let them save face. This is a human interaction, engagement. So you got to understand both sides. Now, there are some criminals in these organizations, some evil dudes, but it's not everybody. Most people are just doing their job. They're just trying to collect their $150,000 salary and go on with their life. So we have to choose the hill that we eventually die on. Right to travel is an important one. And naturally, I'm more passionate about getting the kids out of school system and intergenerational freedom.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, you bared your soul once again. And compared to the last time we talked a month ago, you're looking good. You're clearly inspired by this new strategy that you have. And that's the attitude of a winner. I've heard that's one of the principles of law is you got to believe it. You got to own it. You got to internalize it. And you've got something now. You got it again. You got your Joju back.
I will definitely second that. I would say David has more bigger cojones than anybody I've ever met out there. So keep up the great work. Everything you're doing has been really amazing. And you're learning as you go and teaching people. So that's the most important part.
Right. You're right. It's teaching the real world stuff, T-dubs, about this what I tried and it didn't work, or this what I tried and I did work. And then we can share with other people. Actually, every person on this phone is awesome because you're here because we're being defrauded. And it's like, well, what can we do about it? We got to be strategic in our action and in our approach. But here's one thing we know for a fact, that truth and freedom and voluntary consensual relationship is the path forward. And I just got to get louder about it. We all got to, do whatever we want to, take what part we can in that awakening process. But they're censoring us because they're losing. That's what's going on. Because truth is getting out, they have a problem. Their frauds are falling apart. And this is the more reason to stand up. And, I feel the pain. And it's so like you try the paperwork and we're going to try to win and we don't win. And we try to repeal, it doesn't work. It's like, damn, what can we do? Well, we just keep connecting with the right people, learning different strategies. I learned about something today. I couldn't find it, but the gentleman told me it's called 42 standard objections in court. I'm like, okay, so I got to go find this resource, find this book or find this thing. There's another resource, which is called the Cross-Examinations for Dummies. He said, you got to go get that book. You're going to go to trial. You're going to be in court. You got to learn how to cross-examine these people. And I'm like, okay. So this is the challenge, is We don't become overnight champions. We don't lift 1,000 pounds overnight. We have to lift 1 pound, and then we lift 5 pounds, and then 10 pounds and 15 pounds. So that's what I want to share, just that I'm going into court on the 15th. This is the power of the community. Thank you, Clint. You know, in the co-creation of this thing, which is like, now, guess what? As we develop and grow, if they come after other people in this community, we can send everybody on the Zoom or everybody with letters. And we did that, not with this group, but with 2 months ago, I challenged jurisdiction. I did a live stream. I told all my friends, hey guys, call this number. This is the DA, and request that he prove jurisdiction or they dismiss the case. And I think they must have got 50 calls or 100 calls. They actually turned that phone number off. So the giant has awakened, and you are the giants. So am I. And we are on the winning team. We outnumber these people like 1,000 to 1. So they want us to be afraid. They want us to be cowards, and we're not that. We are the kings and queens. We are the independent owners of this body, this flesh, and we're here for an amazing purpose. And I'm glad Stephen said that, you know, this mission on this earth, like finding this mission, what exciting opportunity and adventure to choose why we came and to remember what was our reason for incarnating, or whatever your beliefs are. God sent you here, but it's not for something small. It is something for big time. And I mean, just getting on this call is like, yes, these are the people. You know, who knows how many people will listen to this later, because it is intergenerational, and we didn't get here overnight. It's been a slow process, a boiling the frogs process, and we're not going to get out of it quickly, but we can get out of it safely and strategically. And sometimes I have to pay the extortion fee. This is the last thing I'll share, and then I'll give it back to you, Clint. I had my car towed 8 times the last 2.5 years or so, and every time they require a driver's license to get it out of the tow yard. And when my license was suspended or expired, I couldn't get it out. So I had to use my friend's driver's license. So there are certain little areas where it's like, I don't know the solution to that, you know, but we can find it out. And maybe it's going after the tow companies. This is something that I still intend to do. Once I get this, you know, these big charges off my back, go out to small claims court or some of the smaller lawsuit stuff, and go sue these tow companies for 15 grand or 10 grand and learn that game. And that way, if they try to come after me again, wherever I'm located, I'll say, great, I'll just use the same template. Or maybe one of you guys do it. Maybe one of you guys go sue these companies after they tow your car or kidnap your person, you know, seize your person. And Martin Luther King was arrested 28 times. I think Gandhi was arrested like 17 times. So this is the price of freedom, and it's not comfortable. And this is the challenge, is like, okay, where can I contribute? Maybe if you got kids or, you know, pets or something, or babies, you know, you can't do it. But if you're responsible for yourself, or your kids are gone, or don't have kids, you know, there's certain areas where you can play. But the more soldiers, the better. Just, these types of gatherings are so powerful because we're like, man, there's other people like me. There's T-Dubs and, you know, Steven and, you know, Mark and Clint. There's a lot of us. I'm like, I can't believe there's so many good people, and they try to stop us and make us feel small, but we are giants. And I'll share that part with you, Clinton, and pass it over. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Well, thanks. I don't know if we'll have time for questions, but that spirit will carry us into next month. That's our time. Thank you very much for your voice. Please come back. Have a good one. Over and out.